and not forget. Hello. I am so tickled to see you all here today. It is such a pleasure to have the opportunity to think together across the airwaves and to think about really important things. This idea of having these virtual forums every month for the entire year has allowed mostly the classroom educators who haven't had this chance to reach out and really excitedly kind of clasp hands with people from all across the continent to think about big things that affect us every single day. And as we've gotten going here, I've got to tell you, these sold out crowds have been really exciting for us. And also, you know, really, hopefully you're seeing it as an invitation to talk more with each other, to talk more with any of us, to think a little bit more deeply about what you do, and most importantly, to take this incredibly hard work that you do every single day and try to elevate it to a place where the rest of the world realizes this is the most important work out there, and what we're each doing is changing the world. And I am not, although I am a person who can at times exaggerate about some things, some of you know that about me, that is not an exaggeration. And it's time for us, the professionals in the profession, to decide that it's time to make what we do match with what we know is most important. So I am Kathy Pomer, in case we have not had the pleasure to meet. I am talking to you from Londonderry, New Hampshire, where we don't speak with a British accent, but we try to. And I am someone who has spent many years lighting fires and getting people excited at the JCC of Greater Boston. And now my opportunity to kind of reach out and bring even more people into the exciting conversations we have has done nothing but delight me and make me realize that this is where it's at. Connecting and making important things happen is definitely where it's at. I also happen to be the educational director at the Sheva Center, and that gives me a chance to feel like we can always be making that a conversation as well. Hi, Rachel. Where we're trying to make sure at JCC Association that we're offering opportunities that are really meeting what your needs are. And even though today might be one chance to do that, we're going to think about doing that in a bigger way over time, and we can only do that with your help. I am thrilled and honored to be the last of the virtual forums for this academic year for a couple different reasons. First of all, I get to go last, which means I get to borrow all of the wisdom that I learned from all of the speakers that came before. Hopefully you weren't listening to all of them, because I'll tell you they are my ideas. But no, I think it's really important that whatever things we pick up, whatever things really resonate with us, we get to borrow those things. And I think that's a really wonderful thing for people to know. You don't have to be the first one who thought it. In fact, that's one of the most wonderful things about being a constructivist. We construct together and take pieces that really fit into our world and make them new by making them relevant. The second thing that I really love about having this opportunity to talk to you all is that I think that having been a classroom educator for years and a director and a consultant in lots of different ways, I think it's really easy to get exhausted and fatigued, and not because you're in any way not working as hard as you possibly can. And it sometimes happens that we go on autopilot and we don't think so much about what we're really doing here. Oh my goodness, somebody would like the Zoom link. May I ask, is Carly or Betsy, Carly, is anybody that might have Devin's email, if you can send an invitation to the Zoom link, would you mind doing that?
Hi, Carly's not here. It's two of her teachers.
Got it. That's okay. Rachel Curran, if you're there, that's okay. Thank you so much. Rachel, you've got Devin's email, I bet. I am finding it humorous that I am in charge of the IT on this.
I might be able to send it.
I love that about you, Stacy. Go right ahead and just send her. She said she's having trouble getting on, and just send her a copy of the Zoom link in an email. Thank you. I think that one of the most important things we do is not have answers to why we do certain things, as you can tell from my IT answer, but to be able to find out how to get that answer, and to be able to make sure that it's in the conversation, that we get off of autopilot and we get excited about what we're doing. So that's another huge reason why I'm happy to be here. And the third reason that I'm happy to be here talking about this planning with intention idea is because I think for a long, long time now, we have been on autopilot with this theme. We sit there in our teacher lounges, which none of us have, so I don't even know why I'm saying that. And we talk about how we're going to plan in these classrooms and what a great idea, and these projects are so fabulous, and the materials that we think would be the most exciting can happen. And frankly, that old way of planning does not even require the addition of children. And I think that that is a travesty. And I really think that it is time to make sure that we have an old way of planning that says you're going to do the group and I'm going to clean the table and we'll make sure that the Mother's Day presents are ready, and all of that kind of stuff needs to take a back seat to really thinking about how we are preparing kids to know what they need to know and how we are preparing kids to not know. If they don't know what's coming, but they know how to think, they're going to be ready for whatever is coming. And it's so important that we get off of the project and the table and the color red and the letter A, and we get into the kinds of places where children are beginning to ask questions they have never asked before. They're starting to come up with answers to those questions we've never even thought about before. And we're really not just trying to regurgitate information that we had from our schooling days into their little heads. I think that it's very important that we get away from what I like to call the deficit model.
It's got to be something.
You're looking to mute. I can mute you there. I think I just did. Sorry if I just unintentionally muted you. If you need to talk, you can unmute. I think it's really important that we get away from the deficit model of a child needing the wisdom in our head so that they know what they can do about it, and start to really look at the wisdom in children. Okay, I'm spending a lot of time on this because I have to say that from birth to whatever age, if we don't start our planning with children, and in the middle part, think about children, and by the end, think about children, then we are not having the image of a child that is capable and competent, and we are basically planning for nothing. So I think what's really important to know is that we, in order to plan with intention, watch this while I do something high tech. In order to plan with intention, we have to know what our intentions are. I think it's really important to know that when you plan with intention, the planning and all things must be aligned with whatever we value. Okay? So that's really where I'd like to start. Now, two super interesting things just happened. Oh, there they are. One is you all disappeared when I shared my screen, and that terrified me that I was talking to myself. But the other is I'm going to ask you all to think with me a little bit right here, because truly the most important thing that I might have just missed is that if we don't plan with this intention, we're not thinking about children the way that we need to. And I'm including this quote by Yanis Korczak. If any of you, I know some of you actually on the screen have just recently been to Yad Vashem in Israel with me to think about the memorial for the Holocaust, and especially in the area that I'm thinking about right now for the children. And if we're not thinking about children right now as having that capable, competent place where we need to draw from, that's our well, then we're really missing the boat here. And I think that Yanis Korczak said it best. He was someone that was incredibly important in thinking about children just before the war, and then being in charge of an incredible orphanage during the war, and then getting on the train to go to his death with hundreds of those children during the war. He said, children are not the people of tomorrow, but are people of today. They have a right to be taken seriously and to be treated with tenderness and respect. They should be allowed to grow into whoever they were meant to be. Unknown person inside of them is our hope for the future. It's really important to me that you know that even if you signed on to this call today because you thought I was going to show you the most amazing organizing, lesson planning binder that you never thought of before, that in fact, the way that I need us to think more urgently is that this is our intention. We could have many ways of trying to figure out how we're going to meet this need, but when we are planning with intention, We've got to start with something that is more urgent than what we've been doing before. So I want to start by asking you all this question, and you're welcome to say it out loud if you want, but I would love somebody on your screen to move over to the chat page, and I think I may need to stop the share so that we can see it. I'm going to do this. The question is really, and this is a wonderful idea that I basically stole from Mark Horowitz, but also saw Tara Ohayon in Dallas doing so beautifully last year. And I think it's important, if we're thinking about our intentions, what are your hopes and dreams for your children in your class by the end of this year? And let's think about by the end of next year. What do you hope they are feeling confident with in terms of what? I want you to go over to your chat. I'm going to stop share because I'm so high tech. And in the chat window, I'm going to open it up here, and I'm going to start reading things that are coming out loud. And I'm going to do a magic trick too at the end of this, but just keep typing in. And where it says to everyone, just push the things that you want people to know. So the ones that have come in so far, you want them to love coming to school. You want them to be excited by new experiences. And you all keep them coming, and just push enter after you do a couple. Good. Oh, you're so good at this. Here we go. Want them to be good friends and know about friendship. Want them to feel valued and listened to and loved. Excited to see each other. Able to make social and emotional connections. Can you all see this list as it comes up too? I'm not sure if you can, but I'm actually, I can share my screen on this one too, so that you can see, but you should be able to see it there too. Oh, you can't. I just took it all away. That was exciting. Sorry. The kinds of things that you're hoping are that children themselves feel ready to take on new experiences and are confident in themselves and who they are, and being able to feel accomplished and being able to communicate feelings. Oh my gosh. Be able to make mistakes and laugh. Self-esteem, to learn to be independent, willing to take risks, be kind to friends and classmates, explore new experiences, to feel a part of a group and a community. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm feeling so fed by this list. It makes me feel incredibly important in what we do, to be confident and comfortable enough to express emotions, to be respectful. Now, as you're adding these, and I hope you can see them coming up on your screen too, because they are beautiful, I want to just make sure you're not forgetting any. I didn't see any of these on there, and I just want to double check. Anybody want to add that you want to make sure they learn the letter S? I'm just checking, because I've heard a lot of people talking about that in the classroom. Maybe I'm confusing you. Maybe the letter A. It might be the beginning of the year, right? The color red. Any of those things? I hope you know, and some of you that don't know me, that I can be a little sarcastic, but what I really want you to know is I don't see that on your list. And I'm also going to ask you this. I'm checking to make sure that I'm not missing this. Let's see, this just in. Through nature, each other, the school, to love learning. I want to make sure, do any of you want to make sure that being quiet is on this list? Waiting, being able to wait. What about, do you want to make sure, if some of you are infant toddler teachers, do you want to make sure that they are able to walk by the time that they leave your classroom? I want you to think about why those things are not on this list. We'll talk about it in just a few minutes, but this list is gorgeous, and it makes me happy to be alive. And thank you from in Baltimore. They will learn those things anyway, is something we are about to go back and understand. So I want you to also know that sometimes we take time. Thank you so much for doing that. I so appreciate it. Sometimes we take time to go ahead and ask parents about that same list. And I've done it in the next week, perhaps, after I've asked teachers during a training before the new year begins. And I ask them, and I make it really incredibly important for them to hear. What I'm saying is, let's dial forward about 18 years and think about how you've just taken your child to college, how you've already gotten the room decorated, you've been to Target, you got all of that done, and now you're about to take this child who always breaks the hug with you first, and you are gonna you're going to break the hug first because you got to leave him or her there. And you're going to be able to let go of that hug because of why. What do they know? What are you confident that they can do? And I've got to tell you that you don't even need to go to the chat window at this point. The list that happens when we are moving forward in this way is the same. The list is absolutely the same. Those parents that might be coming to your classroom and saying, I just need to know, by the way, I've got this application for kindergarten, and I just need to know how many letters in capital and lowercase have you been spending your time on, or those kinds of things. That is not one of the things the parents come up with on this list. The list is absolutely the same. And here's my magic trick. I wrote all these things in before you even started, and they are not even as beautiful and lengthy a list as you have, but I think that you can see here that we're talking about the same thing. If this is what we can agree on for our goals and our wants and our dreams, then this has to be our intention. This has to be what we plan for. Whatever your idea before you came onto this discussion, which is really just me talking to myself, but you all typing beautifully back, has got to be changed in some way if you had a different intention before. And I think that we need to know that our activities, our materials, our time, our space, where our attention is, what we document, what we talk about, has got to be about this list. If we aren't, we are missing the boat. If we aren't, we are missing the intention. And I think it's really huge. So if this, I've heard some people say, is it all that bad if we spend some time on those other things, which is really what most people spend time on planning for in their classroom? Is it really going to hurt kids if we focus on those kinds of things? And what I need to tell you is whatever you focus on is going to grow. It's going to grow. So if you focus on someone who basically like me, was taught to, like many of you too, in school, to be compliant, to listen, to have quiet feet and listening ears, whatever those things are. I'm not sure what the alternative is. Then you are going to raise people that are really interested, like I am, in getting approval from other people and making sure that whatever I do is going to have somebody say, oh, you're sitting so nicely. Oh, you're being so quiet. Oh, you're doing exactly what I told you to do. And then you're going to end up with people that really don't know what to do next. And I think it's really important. I'm going to give you 3 examples why it is so important to know this is your intention. I spoke with a director last week who said, we've got a couple preschools. Some of them are one of them is very emergent, beautiful, really focuses on giving kids choices and letting them have a voice and letting them be respectful and all of those things. The other one is, it's for those parents that are interested in letters and numbers and making sure that those different benchmarks are set and made, and we don't focus so much on the social emotional. And I said, oh my gosh, that's awesome. So you're giving parents a choice. That's lovely. And she said, yes. And I said, I just need you to know the choice to me is a little like offering healthy snacks in one room and handing out cartons of cigarettes in the other. I think it is so important that we know that even if it is easier to somehow just give in to this ridiculous energy of giving people an idea of what they think learning is when it isn't, we have got to stop that. It really is all that bad. I'm going to give you a second instance of why it is all that bad. And I'm spending this much time on intention because I feel like we spend too much time planning for other things. So the second instance is, I just want you to write on your notepads there to look up an amazing NPR podcast where Margaret Heffernan, good luck with spelling that, was doing this wonderful work on chickens, and on chickens that were in groups, different kinds of groups. And the one kind of group of chickens was very busy. They wanted to know how productive they were, and it's lucky with chickens because you can tell how many eggs they lay. They decided to see what would happen if they took a normal group of happy chickens all coexisting together, and they put them in one group and let them continue doing what they were doing with all of the obstacles out of their way. And then they took the other and decided that basically they were going to take the best performing chickens of all those incredible chickens that were already laying the best eggs, and put them all together in a group. So that can be that other classroom we talked about where we're really focusing on what's happening. The product is important, making sure they have all those learning and to read and write and making sure that they're able to sit and be quiet and all of that. In the end, the question was asked, who was more productive? And they had a really, really hard time deciding who was more productive between those two rooms, because on the in the one chicken area that where they had been left alone to do their thing, they were terribly productive. Everything was great. They actually were more productive because they spent less time interrupting them and good things happened. And in the other room, they couldn't get the data because there were only 3 chickens alive. The rest had pecked each other to death. I think it is really important that we realize that if we are helping to grow the social emotional impact of what we have when we have the intention of focusing on these very goals you gave me, then we will end up with the most well-rounded, amazing chickens who are able to produce incredible things in a community that is kind of going to look like the one I want to be a part of. And when we don't, we're really planning for disaster. The last example I want to give you is that I've had this opportunity to really think hard about this on airplanes lately. I've told some of you this story where I'm seeing all of these business folk who are very frustrated in their work because employees just aren't what they used to be. They don't want to think for themselves. They don't want to come up with new strategies and ideas. They definitely want to do what they're told. But these companies know that there's no way to act like that. You can't just have people do what they're told or we're just going to get what we always got. And so I made sure that they know that the people that are like that already are in our preschools right now. And the people who know how they tick are you all. So we've got to know that our focus, the lens of our camera, everything we're doing is with that in mind. When we plan intentionally to meet these goals, then children are ready for anything, even for the things they don't know. They'll be ready to handle it. I need to tell you, if you haven't heard me say this before, that there is zero empirical evidence that children who are taught to read and write before the age of 7 are any differently off after 6 months of kindergarten, 6 weeks of kindergarten and first grade. There is nothing different about them. However, children that are not given those social emotional foundations, the ways to really support them before the age of 7, they will never make it up. They will never make it up. And yet I walk into classroom after classroom of early childhood that looks like a second grade classroom, that looks like we've got all these ideas that don't come from the kids. We need to start talking to parents and educators and each other about how this is what readiness is, and it has to look like what we value. I'm going to just say this part quickly because I think that if this is what we value and if this is really truly how we operate, aligning our practice with our values, then I'm also going to tell you, I think this is what's Jewish about our practice. This is the essence of being Jewish. This is something I wanted you to hear from Michael Zieger, who was a hidden child in the war. He and his family had been taken in by this incredibly amazing man who was known as the village fool, because he wasn't Jewish. He was very into nature. He was very into kindness. He was very into helping, and he thought he could help hide this Jewish family. And the family, Michael's father, Michael was 7 at the time, said, "There's really nothing you have that you can offer us. You have no money. You have no influence. You're not Jewish. You don't know what we're talking about here." And in the end, he was the only person that would take them in. He left that experience after hiding in a 4-foot hole with his family for 18 months, feeling like Michael Zieger was actually the essence of everything Jewish that was important. Living through those kind of values will save us. Silence and indifference does nothing. Never again, quote unquote, is meaningless unless people are willing to do what they know is most important. And I have to tell you, what's most important are all those goals you wrote down a moment ago. If your classroom doesn't look like that right now, if your planning time doesn't elevate that conversation right now, it's time to make a new conversation. If you're worried that making your classroom more Jewish is about making sure that you have a nice little plastic challah and kiddush cup in your house area, think again. We're thinking about the essence of what is going to make this new generation different from whatever came before. So I think that this is where the Sheva framework comes in handy. The framework and Jewish lenses help to guide our practice. Not because Sheva is a thing or a message. Like, you can't really focus on Sheva unless thinking was actually the word that was going there. Thinking really hard about the number 7. Sheva really only means 7. I just want you all to know that. I'm demystifying it for you. But if you can use the lenses and the framework here to align your practice with what you value, that is what helps us to plan with intention and gives us a chance to think about our goals. This is what is really huge. So I want you to know now that basically, if in fact we could look through the lenses and the elements to think about how to move forward and plan with intention, there really are only 4, but they're big and they're wonderful and they will make you love your job more every single day. So I want to start here with the first one. We will have some time to talk more. It's so weird having you out there and not chatting with you. Is everybody good so far? Oh, good. Nice thumbs up. I'm so glad. I'm so glad. But I really want to hear from you in a few moments. And I need to let you know that spending the first half hour together on intention is on purpose. That's with intention. I think you get to that planning room and you're so busy writing down what you're going to do and how you're going to do it that you forget what you were supposed to focus on. And I think it's a really important thing. Having 4 foundational steps here, none of the first 3 starting with the word plan is with intention. You can't plan until you do some homework first. And this is really huge. I'm also going to say that some of your schools have probably been spending more time on this booklet and the lenses and the framework than others. And I want this to kind of be an invitation, a provocation for you all. If I'm saying some things that you kind of understand, but you'd love to talk more about, please do it. I'm free that day if you'd like to chat with me about it. And I implore you to talk to each other because it's in those conversations that we understand what's really important. So the first thing here is that I want you to know that if you do not start by noticing and observing what is truly there, then you have nothing to go on. And that's why those olden days of me and my planner in my own little mad scientist classroom without any children added have nothing to do with what kids really need to know these days. Kedusha is the lens that we look through that helps us know the universal value of intention, of presence, of noticing what is happening right now. And Hitori root, that's there without explanation so that you will find a way to go in here and figure out what it is. To make us remember that without awakening, without that spark, without being excited about what could happen next, we've got nothing. It can't just come because I'm waiting for spring to start. I can't wait to document spring once spring starts. I can't wait to dive into spring when spring starts. Like, it's not ever about spring. It's got to be about your children, what they're noticing, what they're excited about, those kinds of things. If they happen to go out and step into a giant mud puddle outside, that's spring to them. And it's time to really think about that way of learning spring. There's nothing like rubbing mud all over yourself to learn about spring, as opposed to here are pictures of trees going from winter to summer. What happened in the middle? How about we go touch a tree? How about we go hug a tree? How about we really look at trees and study trees and ask questions that have to do with what the kids noticed first? I think that's important. And it sure would be a lot more important when Tu B'Shvat comes by if you already have a relationship with some trees. It's a little bit less contrived. It's a little bit less inauthentic. It means we're really coming from something that you've noticed is important to your people in that classroom culture. The second thing I want you to think about is documentation. It used to be that we were all saying, oh my gosh, how can I document? I'm already so busy doing these other things. What do you mean I have to document now? And when I went to Israel a few months ago, and this teacher came out because she had this documentation board that was incredibly organic. It was messy. It had lots of things that were going on in that documentation board that didn't necessarily seem like it was ready for presenting to the families. And in this conversation, this quote came up a lot where a lot of the folks in Israel were saying, this isn't a production company. We're not doing this so that we can say we put it up on the wall. I hope you looked. We're doing it so that we have all the materials we know to use to help us know what to do next. You want to put documentation where everybody can see it. You want to put documentation where kids can see it and think about it, whether they are infants, toddlers, threes, preschoolers, everybody that goes by, parents, should be able to help you. And when you look through the lens of Tselem Elohim, which is dignity and potential for all, then you will hear ideas that people have once they see that documentation as to what to do next. The third piece here that a lot of people skip, because they put up that documentation maybe for the wrong reasons, is to stop and talk to each other and reflect on what the heck that means. When I saw this happen, it meant this to me. Maybe when you saw it happen, it meant something else. We've got to make sure that we saw what we saw. We've got to make sure that we decide as a group what it is we want to grow. And we can discuss the many ways in which to grow those sparks so they can connect to those bigger values that we talked about before. When I was in Boston, we worked really hard on this, two things. One is, if you missed Mark's virtual forum last month, it was incredible, and it was all about reflection with some really wonderful ways to include reflection in your daily planning time. The best thing about these forums is that they are all recorded and taped on the jcca.me website, and you can go back and watch it again, and you can take time with your planning team to really think about how you're going to make time for that reflection, how you're going to make time for that discussion together. That's the first thing. The second piece is that when I was in Boston, we wanted people talking about discussing planning with intention and other kinds of things. And this was way back in the early days when the Sheva document looked like this. So some of the references on this guide are referring to this document instead of the one we hold now, which looks like this. But all this ended up being was a wonderful opportunity to ask these kinds of questions while you're planning. What is it you want to do based on what you saw last week? What activity or theme are you planning over what period based on what you saw the children are interested? It is not time for this week to be about dump trucks and next week to be about the color blue. It has got to be about what you see children having interest in, and then thinking about why. What's the educational value? Whose learning is it? Which of the elements of Sheva are visible, and how are you going to grow and extend this plan? Our planning times need to be spent having these kind of conversations. The very last thing we write down is what we're actually going to do. I think it's super important to make sure that we're taking the time to think about these kind of big things. Then it's time to make the plan. And then you're going to plan how to use the information to reach those goals that we all already agreed upon. And when you think about how you're going to support that, I'm going to give you an example of something. And we're going to go back to one of those things that you did not include earlier on. And that is, will this child be walking by the time they leave? And what do I need to do to help them walk? If you really need to think about what you need to do to help a child who is just pulling up and starting to walk, I hope you realize it's about encouraging them, maybe inviting them, provoking them, making something worthwhile to walk to. It's about growing the ideas. If they're already thinking about pulling up, maybe there should be more places to pull up. And maybe at one point you put out a finger so you can collaborate. Maybe there's another child working on that. A huge part of your planning is about removing obstacles to whatever the ideas are. How about you just say, yes, let's figure out how we're going to make that happen. And then extend the runway so that this engagement, this excitement, what you're doing with this is actually going to be your curriculum, what you do going forward. A Jewish holiday might even land right in the middle of your moment there, and you're going to find ways to connect, because learning is not linear. It has got to be connected to bigger important things. Sometimes you need to ask the children whether they're talking or not. Sometimes it takes trial and error. But as long as you are doing these kinds of things, the very things you know in your soul are right to do when a child is learning to walk, that's what we're going to do when they're excited about that jet stream from the airplane that just flew overhead. And that's what we're going to do when they're so excited about this ant that they're seeing crawling across the grass, on a blade of grass. We ask questions, we encourage, we invite, we provoke. We ask them, this is a big 3 that I try to do with children in my class, with teachers I work with anybody. What materials, time, and space do you need to grow this idea. It's really, really huge. We've got to go back to knowing that this is not the deficit approach. We are not sticking information in a head. Once they get older, we're going to realize information is a Google away. Thinking is not. Wondering, discovering, trying to figure this out is not. So then our real issues come into, how do we make this plan visible? How do we figure out a way to take this incredibly complicated and much higher level way of thinking, bigger than I will put beans in the sensory table, and I will put blue books and books about blue in the book area. This is a much bigger thing, and there's a million different ways to do this. We might web those things. We might, in some way, plan in retrospect and make sure that what we put up that's visible shows the very detailed things that we did after we did them. We're going to need to talk about this and find a way to show what helps us the most. We'll put down observation notes. We'll think about what questions worked. We're going to think about backwards design, something that Judy Marashik talked to us about earlier in the year that has to do with our values first. What materials, time, and space did we need to tweak? What happened when you did? And when you do those kinds of things, you need to also include the rest of the list. What might be there in your fabulous state mandated list of things to include? What might be there if you're in Canada with your fabulous ministry, which I just love calling it that. It makes me think I'm in Hogwarts every day. But your ministry, when they come in and they're saying that you need to do these things. What kind of pieces here that might be part of your assessment? What kind of pieces here that show what kind of learning was happening? But we don't start with those. If we start with those, then we have these horrible situations of sitting with a kid and a pair of scissors, seeing if they can cut. And I have got to tell you, those days have got to be gone. If they need scissors and tools to help them create whatever it is that spark of Hittori root made happen in them, then the onus is on us to see if they use those scissors in a way that might need more support. We don't start with the scissors. We don't start with that skill. We start with the spark. Now, you all probably have a million different ideas of ways that you can do this kind of thing and make it visible. And I feel like that may be a wonderful thing for you all to think about after this is over. I went to, last year, we had a great opportunity to go to the Boulder Journey School and see how sometimes they put clipboards up with different kids' names on it so they would follow that child around. Sometimes they had clipboards that were in different areas so that it was more of I can see what kids are doing in this area. But they did not start with the skill, and they did not start in a vacuum. Because I've got to tell you, when a child is learning to walk, they're not just learning to walk. What else are they learning? Shout this out from wherever you are. What else are they learning when a child is learning to walk? Are you there?
Sorry, we were typing, but we said confidence, risk.
Oh, good. Oh, good. I'm totally, let me get off of here and I can see you're typing. Absolutely. So, confidence. Let's see. I might have just gotten rid of something I wasn't supposed to get rid of. Okay. So here we go. Exactly. Balance, coordination, learning how their body works, confidence, risk-taking, all of those kinds of things. It's really important that you realize that rarely is somebody learning just one thing. They are absolutely diving into whatever it is they're walking towards. What does that taste like when I shove that in my mouth, which is something I'm still learning on a daily basis. They're finding all of these ways to encompass their world in a way that they would never be able to figure out unless they were able to stand up and walk. It's independence. It's how their bodies fit. It's spatial relations. It's all of those things. But you don't start by sitting down and trying to have a dissertation with a child about confidence or balance or those things. It happens while they're learning, and I think it is super important that we make time for those kinds of things. So it doesn't really matter to me how you're going to make this happen, but the two things you need to know are that you have got to find a way Oh, determination. I love, you guys are great. I don't know why these aren't like 6-week long workshops, because I'm having a wonderful time just reading some of these things that you're putting there. And I hope that this is almost like an appetizer. So you think about these kinds of things when you go back to the folks that you're working with. It's super important that you do that. So the next piece that I just got rid of all of you. There you are. Hello. I missed you there for a moment. Is that not only does it need to be visible, it has to be something you can talk about. You've got to be able to articulate what we do and why we do it. This is National Teachers Day. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you already. But the fact that you are making time today to think about how to do your job with more professionalism, the way that you can really let other people know what is important about what we do and what happens in early childhood, and how others must be responsive to that. That's how we will rise up. That is how we will make this happen. That is how change is going to happen. And that is how we move forward. We had this opportunity a few years ago to realize that teachers weren't feeling as well supported in what to say about why we do what we do. They were very good at saying, oh, we don't teach them the letters. No, we don't do that. Or we don't teach them how to write. That's just not what we do. But they didn't stick in there what we do. And what we do is amazing. Only if we can articulate it to others. So that's a place that I want you to spend some time doing. So I feel like I want to have some time where we can ask some questions here back and forth. But what I want you to do is think about something that somebody saw today, a nugget of a spark of something that somebody saw today. You do at the same time, like you will hear from Mark's his recording last month, need to think about what's developmentally appropriate in your age group. But at the same time, a spark is a spark. And if somebody out there, you can go back if you want, I'll stop share, if wants to share with me one spark you saw today, we're going to practice just all together quickly thinking about what should come next. Does somebody have one they want to share just really briefly? Something you saw in the classroom this morning, anything, something that a child was interested in, a spark. Go for it.
We were working with
I know, it's fun when I say go to it. Go for it for a million of you all. All right, Gina, somebody in your group? Give us one. Come over closer, and everybody's going to listen because we're going to hear from you. What do you do with this spark? Hi.
I was very proud because one of my students, I work with a 1-year-old, he told me
Oh, wait, say it again. He told you what?
he told me he had poop in his pants today. We're working on potty training.
Awesome.
Student this week.
That is awesome. So what I need you now to do in your chat rooms is tell us what comes next. What comes next? How do you help with that? I want to see it. Make it as down and dirty as it can be. Let's see it right here. What do you do with that? Just go ahead and type. What comes next? What did you do? What do you do next? What do you wonder about? What are the kinds of ways that you're going to get obstacles out of the way so that that can become the focus of everyone?
Kathy, I have a question.
Yes.
Can I add something else while we're typing?
Please.
Okay, so this morning in my classroom, one of the little girls wrote her name.
Yes.
On a piece of paper.
Fabulous.
So then a lot of the other students, if they could write their name, they wanted to start writing their names, and some that aren't quite there yet were asking if I could write their names for them, and then they could draw it underneath. So part of what I'm wondering about with this is going back to the conversation on letters and learning letters. So how do we incorporate, I mean, not pressing them necessarily with learning letters, but also encouraging it if it's something that they do want to learn?
So I think that's such a great question. I'm going to answer, we're going to go into both at the same time. One thing you'll see is that people are a little bit stuck about a whole lot to do with the poopy pants, except for perhaps to take them off.
Oh, okay.
And I get that. And I think that's great. The big thing the question I'm going to ask you to kind of grow that idea, and you don't need to do it right here, is that I'm going to ask you how many times, because I think I already know the answer, do you actually document those kind of triumphs? And I'm going to say, we don't. We don't document bathrooming things. We don't document conversations at the lunch table so much. We don't document the kind of things that happen while we're transitioning from point A to point B. And I just want to ask you why we don't. Because it's those places that we're going to find the most incredible, deep, rich conversations that end up happening in a way that we've got to really be clear with. So I want you to know that it's in those times. Yes, we need to talk about praise, and that's a whole virtual forum in and of itself. And yes, we need to talk about communicating with the family. But if you can focus on what that child can now do because they're able to do this, that's going to grow your curriculum. So to go back to what was happening there in Jacksonville, I've got to tell you that we've got to realize that when any spark comes up, we need to be supportive and ask them, what do we do next? And in fact, one more thing that you didn't think of yet is talk to the kids about what they should do next. What do we do with that? Why is that important? It might be with the poop dance that you can go on a longer trip somewhere without having to change, or you might be able to play longer or finish your project. You've got to connect it with why it's important. The same thing with writing your name. I find that when somebody writes their name, or when someone makes a picture that actually looks like what it was supposed to look like, adults start to froth at the mouth with such excitement that it's almost like we just discovered penicillin. And a child on their own is writing in the language of adults, and they're making a horse that looks like a horse. And do not tell me that a child doesn't already feel that they've just tapped into something so much bigger and better than probably poop in their pants. And because we don't have necessarily the same excitement over it. And I think we need to. We've got to be really careful. The fact that they wrote their name is not important because now they can write their name. It's important because why? When you can write your name, shout out. What else can you do? Everybody.
Write other names and other letters.
You could write other letters. You could write a letter to someone. You could save your building that you just built. You could write a card for somebody that isn't feeling well, right? You could let people know that you made your picture instead of the teacher coming over and writing your name on your picture. You could suddenly have such independence. You've got to think of this, of why it is important. And I would say that it's amazing they can write their name, but if you can froth a little less about the fact that they wrote their name and help connect them to, now what do we do with that and what do you all need? I think that that's going to guide us through the lenses instead of guiding us through like readiness, dementia. Like we become crazy Dr. Demento when it comes to readiness.
We weren't saying that it was the huge celebration was that they wrote their name. Right. It was that, okay, so this is the spark.
Yes.
Yes. And so like you were saying, where do we go with this? Because we were talking about letters earlier.
Yes.
So,
and I agree that the spark has got to be in connecting it to why it is so important. If we're stopping with the skill of being able to just write your own name, then I think we're short-circuiting it. And if we could grow it into the skill of making sure that out by the sand area, we can see our, that Kathy was here because I left a K there or something like that. But we just have to be careful to ask the kids what we should do next and what we should do now, and not try to have the other kids think that just copying what that child did is the way to get that praise or is the way to get that attention. I think that's the thing. So the question is, how can you make a connection to what's really meaningful and not stop at the writing of the name as being meaningful? And when you look at your wipe-off boards outside of your classrooms, I think you're going to notice that oftentimes we stop with like the biggest hitter and it isn't going deep. I went to a classroom the other day where they were talking about Mother's Day and Mother's Day gifts. And I heard the conversation that came up about what they should do for Mother's Day. And one child went into this whole direction about how sad and scared and lonely they were when their mommy kissed them and left them in their room that night. And a bunch of other kids jumped into that conversation. Well, the teacher didn't want to give airtime to that conversation. And she ended up with lovely, all looking the same Mother's Day gifts at the end because that was her question. But if she had followed the line of conversation and grew this incredibly interesting, how can we feel better when we get tucked in at night? What do we need? What do we know will happen? Like, that's a whole amazing path to go down. And you might not end up with Mother's Day gifts at the end of it, but we're going to know a whole lot more about thinking, and kids are going to know a whole lot more about their feelings if you can take time to do that. So I think that that's a great, we don't get unexcited. We're not trying to get kids not to be able to communicate, but we need to put it together with that goal of communication and not just with letters. So there's two things I want to share with you, and then this went so fast and I don't want to leave. And oh, did you want to add one more thing? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so what about a teacher providing a potential spark for the classroom?
Oh,
and I'll
yeah.
give you an example.
Provocation, invitation, absolutely. And if it picks up, it picks up.
Okay, all right, 'cause
Yeah.
I do that quite a bit in my classroom. And
I would like to come to your classroom. I think that we are looking to be invited and provoked. And if our rooms are inspiration for inquiry, and the teachers who are part of the culture of our room can be providing authentic invitation and provocation, oh my gosh, that's the culture we want, right? It really is important. And if you look into some of the findings of the deep-seated initiatives from Reggio, a lot of it is about the kind of places that teachers bring kids, and not necessarily having them come up with it or invent it on their own. But I think
that's a big deal here, because they're 3 and 4. Their world is still small.
Yes.
They may not know to go look at worms, but if you bring a box of worms in and put it on the table.
Absolutely. But if you also, I so love that, but if you also go too far, that's a perfect example. I had an example a few years ago of teachers that were excited about, kids that were excited about cheetahs, and teachers that took them to the migration habits of cheetahs in Africa, which left them completely cold. Like, they had no idea what that was really about, or what it was why it was about cheetahs. Cheetahs were fast and exciting, and they wanted to hear more about what their ideas for cheetahs. Do you know what I mean? I love that you can make it relevant. I feel like what's really important is that we think really hard about the ways that we can help kids continue to want to learn. These are the goals you all wrote down in the beginning. These are the things that we're the most excited about. And I think that if that comes with a provocation from us, that's fabulous, as long as we're willing to let go of what happens next. Because oftentimes teachers have already got the next 17 steps already set in their head of what we're going to do about worms. And I think that's where we leave them cold. So I love that you asked that. And that's.
Well, I might disagree with you on that, because my kids didn't think about measuring how long the worms were until I put the ruler out.
It's a provocation. It's different than putting out a project.
Right.
I am agreeing with you. If you said, today we will measure worms, that's different than making sure that you're watching it, what they're asking, you're repeating back the questions that they're having. You're realizing that some are saying one is longer than the other. You might say, how do you know? Then you might put that provocation of that measurer out, and suddenly it becomes really authentic. Oh, you've got to add those pieces. Otherwise, they're missing the story. They're missing a big part of the story. It's about the invitation and the provocation. It's not about planning the activity and the project. I think that that's really important. You'll find that math opportunities, literacy opportunities, they're all going to come up. They're all going to come up. And if we can do this with holidays and talking with parents and things that we're excited about, questions that we don't know the answers to, then we're making a cycle of why and a culture of learning that's really huge. So my final remarks here that have gone way too fast are from some people that I love being guided by. One is I invite you to look at The Art of Awareness by Curtis and Carter, Deb Curtis and Margie Carter, who are two people that I love to learn from, who are really thinking hard about the two voices of a teacher in the very beginning of this book, where how we have to go to this sort of right way of thinking, where it comes to, it's as if in the classroom, I'm an architect designing an environment for discovery, which I think speaks right to what you were just saying. I'm a gardener tilling the soil, planting seeds for a love of learning. I arrange things with discovery and beauty in mind, choosing things from nature and loose parts for play in the classroom. I take time to sit and to listen. I could discover their questions and encourage their curiosity so they'll be excited about learning. And really, this goes on, but this part here about how it is so important that I can observe each child because they have so much to teach me. Watching closely, I see so much growth unfolding. This is huge. And one last bit of wisdom from one more Dr. Seuss. If you don't know this book already, and I wish you would find it, it was one of the last books that Dr. Seuss was writing, and he died while writing it, and so he got a lot of help with Jack Pilutsky and Lane Smith. And it's about this teacher, Miss Bonkers, who I try to model myself on, who is really trying hard to help kids think. And even when the principal gets terribly worried about the fact that tests are coming, and what if they don't know the information, she's not worried at all, because she's already taught them about listening and laughing and smelling and wondering and questions. And even though there were pieces on there that they'd never heard, they somehow answered every one, enjoying every word. If we can help kids think and wonder and help people realize that that's where it's all about, and that that is the important place that we need to plan for every day with our invitations, with our toolboxes, with what we need to grow the learning, and then document what came of that, we are doing the most important work of all. I cannot believe how fast that went. I would like now to spend a few more hours listening to you all talk for a little while. And I just want to open myself up and let you know that kpomer@jcca.org is my email. If anybody wants to talk more or wonder or question, I never have enough time to get into actual classrooms with you all. So I'm just inviting myself that way via email.
What is the email again? I'm sorry.
Pomer, Kathy Pomer, Pomer, @jcca.org. And the more we can talk about these things and wonder and ask and figure it out, the better.
Kathy, are all these Sheva talks, are they on YouTube as well?
They're all on jcca.me, which is a really hard website to figure out. And so what I would suggest is you write a lovely email to Michelle Kimso or Mackenzie, and you can write to me if you don't know who those people are, and they will send you the links. Every single one is recorded. Thank you a million times. I have a few more moments if some people want to stay and ask questions, but I'm gonna stop recording here. And I just want to thank you for making this time. Everybody take good care and stay on. I'm here if you need me. I'll stay for a few moments. Take care. Happy Teacher Day. Bye. If you need to go on the bottom right where it says leave meeting, you just click on that part. And if you want to stay, ask away. I'm here for a few more moments. In Jacksonville.
And being able to stay are two different things. Have a good one.
Hi. Say that again.
I said leaving. We have to leave, unfortunately.
All right. So on the bottom right, just click on.
I guess we'll try. It's not a touch screen, I guess.
No, it's probably not. So move your cursor.
See, that was my. All right, goodbye.
Bye. Exactly. So in Jacksonville, was that useful? Was that helpful? I love that you had time to say that, because I think you're absolutely right. It is a dance between the two, and you cannot just wait. If it's otherwise, it may not extend. You play a role. You play a very important role, and I think it's through that provocation and that invitation.
Well, I think in our classrooms, we try and blend the skills of, and I'll give you another example of the worms. Okay, so that was an opportunity for us to practice our counting 1 through 12, number recognition, and actually learning how to use a ruler. So that was very useful, and the kids did some other things with the worms. Some of you may not want to know, but and we made a worm habitat. We observed their tunnels, and then we ended up releasing them.
Right.
But I do believe that skills is still important, because
I completely agree that skills are important. I'm actually realizing are you okay if I did not push stop record, so we're recording this too, which I love. Are you okay with that? I just want to make sure you're all okay with that.
Yeah, fine.
I just didn't know if there's any legality with my not telling you that. I am not saying skills are not important. I'm saying they're not the spark from which we start. If a child needs to get that soup in their mouth, you're going to give them a spoon eventually, right? If a child is trying to figure out whose worm is bigger or how far did the airplane go, you're going to say, gosh, it would be great if we could measure that somehow. And you're not going to withhold information that could help them extend. Oh my gosh, mine went this much farther. And I can measure that with this, but I could also measure it with my leg. And I can also, you don't withhold those things. And those things actually have the opportunity to provoke and extend play. But all too often, in our societies and in our classrooms, planning starts with that skill. Planning starts with, to this week we will do measuring, and this week we will do rulers, and this week we will do inches, and I feel like what we're missing is that the engine has to be that the spark came from the kids' interests. And when they know that something is relevant, when something is useful, a measuring cup makes a whole lot more sense when you're cooking than if you're just drinking water. We still need to figure out what tools and things we can put in their world that are going to help them know that teachers dance very interactively with children to help them get what they need to extend that fire, to extend that excitement, to extend whatever it is that got them going in the beginning. And that is very much part of our professional role. I just think that I've just seen people sit down with planning and start with a measuring stick. This is the week I want to teach you about measuring. And I think that is a place that I think it doesn't show that we think kids are capable and competent. It doesn't make us realize that they can think in ways that are embedded in meaning, like I need to know how big that worm is, or I need to know how long that tunnel is. It just makes us think that, wow, we know about measuring and you don't, and one day this might be useful to you, so I'm going to teach you about this measuring stick. And I am inviting you to think about flipping it and start, which it sounds like you're doing already, and starting with that spark, that Hitori root that came from a child that you noticed because you took the time to notice. That to me is everything.
Let me give you another example that is not necessarily child-driven, but I think at our 3 and 4-year-old age, learning how to use a scissors is an important skill.
Mm-hmm.
So in my classroom, I have a cutting area with the scissors, and I have shapes that I have that they can cut out and they can create things with, or can they just practice their cutting. And every year, I've challenged my class to create a paper chain around the classroom. Beautiful. So it's a goal. They work as a team. They practice that cutting. But I start with introducing the scissors, and let's get the scissors cutting right so they're not cutting like this, or they're not cutting like this. They're using the scissors correctly. Right. And let them do what they want with that. We're providing them with some things that they can use.
Mm-hmm. I have two thoughts. My other thought is I just wish we could talk like this for the rest of the day, because I'm loving this. I have got to get to Jacksonville. I am very excited to meet with you all. I have a couple different thoughts. The first thing is, I think that scissors are a tool that help us get something done that we need to get done. I think that if it's exciting and compelling to know that every year they get to your class, they're able to build something that's so big it fits in the entire class, that to me is a spark. That's a very exciting thing, especially if they saw it happen last year, or if it's a kind of ritual or tradition in your school or whatever. That to me is the exciting part. I probably would make sure, as with all tools, that things are available to kids, and that when they're able to use them successfully, we talk about how cool that is. They were able to make it so long, or they were able to cut it off exactly where they wanted. And if I'm watching them closely enough, I might notice that they were frustrated that it didn't cut where they wanted it to, or that maybe in some way it was more awkward, or maybe they're realizing, suddenly you're realizing they're a lefty or they're a righty when you thought it was the other way. That to me is the better time to insert information, because it suddenly is very relevant to a child, than sitting down and saying, we're going to start by learning how to use the scissors, and then this is what we're going to make. I think that what we're really trying to do, if we could think about it, is following children who are capable and competent around, and helping them with materials, tools, time, and space to use whatever we have at our disposal to continue being successful. And so I would probably just fidget a little bit with the timing of that, so that it starts with a child who has.
We don't actually start our paper chain until the second part of the year, when everybody knows how to cut, and then it's a challenge, because then
what I think is so interesting, it could also be
lines, and they cut everything themselves.
And it could also really be that you start by saying, this is the second half of the year. This is a big year for us. We're very excited. What are some ideas of things we could make that would feel really monumental right now, because you've done so much and you've gotten to such an exciting place, and whatever it is, they may come up with something much more exciting and thrilling and bigger and fabulous than a paper chain around the room. Yeah. And they may by the end of it know how to use scissors and hole punches and staplers and perhaps eyedroppers. Whatever it is, I think we're limiting ourselves if we start with the tool. We are opening up the world of connection and excitement and spark and learning if we have that conversation with kids and start with what it is that they want to do. But I am so excited that we're having this conversation, and I feel like there are many different ways to cook an egg. I'm just putting out there that we're planning with intention. For me, the intention to cut with scissors is almost like the intention of, I hope this baby walks one day. They'll learn how to do the scissors, and we'll come in there and help if it feels awkward, but we don't start with that being the goal. Just like you would help a child if they were about to tumble when they were standing. You might put your hand out. It's the same.
We're pretty big on starting on the project approach. You're starting with, for my world, I call it unit studies. So
yes.
We introduce worms, or, we're doing right now, I've got ladybugs, caterpillars.
And did that start because of the kids? Like, you want to go back.
Right now.
And if it starts because of a spark in a child, if it starts because it was a conversation, if it came from them, you're onto something huge. You're onto something huge. I, unfortunately, have got to go. I am going to thank you so, so much for your time.
Okay.
And I'm going to say that if we have a chance to
what we were talking about.
If we have a chance to talk a little bit more in the future, I would love that. So let's see how we can help you all down there. I thank you so much for coming on board today. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Kathy.
Take care.